Right? I've heard it said so many times that this whole thing of Christianity is about relationship. It's not about religion. It's about relationship. This whole aspect of Christianity all centers around relationship, not only with Jesus Christ, but with others. And we are really touched by others, and we are influenced by others. And during this 50 days of transformation, we have taken a look at how things are transformed in our life when we become Christians. Because Christians are transformed people. We don't walk the way we used to walk. We don't do the things we used to do. We don't even think the way that we used to think. We think differently. As a matter of fact, the scripture says, I beseech ye therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, to present your bodies a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable unto God, which is your reasonable service. And be not conformed to this world, but be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind. And we've been looking at that. Week after week after week, we have been talking about the renewing of our mind, because we realize that unless we renew our mind, unless we begin to think differently, and not think like the world thinks, then there is no hope for Christianity. There is no hope for us as people, because God doesn't want us to be like the world. He wants us to be different. Amen? And so our key question that we have to ask as a church of Jesus Christ and as the bride of Christ, the key question is not, do we fit in culturally? The key question is that we would speak the truth in love. That is the question that we have to answer. And that is the thing that we need to do. Now, we're not taken out of culture. We have been placed in this time, in this era, for a reason and for a purpose. And that purpose is that we would connect with people who are on the outside in the world that do not know Jesus Christ and have a relationship with Him, and that we would encourage them to have a relationship with Jesus. And that is so important. This morning we are going to look at the fifth of the Transforming series, and that is 50 Days of Transformation, and it's on relationships. We've been looking at transforming key areas of our life. For example, last week we looked at emotional health. And I want to say again that you cannot trust your feelings. You just can't. Feelings are going to come and go, but I want to tell you the truth always remains, always. And it is the truth that we base our belief on. But this morning I want us to look at relational health. Transforming your relationships. It's a good Sunday to talk about relationships, because today is the day. If you came unaware of what goes on today, I want to tell you, you're going to roll out of this place today. It is scrumptious. And I always feel as if when I come to this day that I'm excited about it until I've eaten half the turkey that I was supposed to cook and bring to the dinner. No, I didn't do that at all. I want us to look at diffusing fears that ruin relationships. To do that, we're going to go all the way back to Genesis. Look at the first couple, Adam and Eve, and because that's where all the problems started. I'm amazed when it comes to it that the problems didn't start with animals. It didn't start with God creating the world. It didn't start with natural disasters. It didn't start with any of that. The problem started when man entered the scene. Isn't that amazing? To look at the first couple, Adam and Eve, because again, that's where all the problems started. God wanted to create an environment for human beings because God wanted a family. Did you know that? He made it all because he wants you to be in his family. He made Adam, and he put him in the Garden of Eden, and it was a perfect paradise. Adam had everything he could possibly want, except he was lonely. Because he noticed that animals had male and female. He noticed that they had mates, but there was no mate for Adam whatsoever. And so I think God thought, you know what? I made Adam, but I could do better than that. And then he makes woman. So God makes Adam out of the dust. And if you want to know why men are just have a propensity towards dirt, that is why. My wife, as a matter of fact, she once in a while will get a little upset at me because I track through the house, she says. I can't help it. I'm made of dirt. So that's just the way it is. One pastor said this: there is symbolism in this, that God created Adam's helpmate, his partner for life, his wife, out of his rib. He didn't take him from his feet where he could lord over her. Did you hear that, guys? Where he could lord over her. He didn't take her from his head where she would lord over him, but he took his wife from his side where she would be his equal, his partner. And he took her from a rib close to his heart as a symbol of she is to be deeply loved by each one of us. Now, things went along really great because there was no sin. What a deal. There was no sadness. There was no sickness. There were no mosquitoes. There were no mice. There was no sorrow. There was no jealousy. Why, the weather was perfect. It was perfect. And what's the deal with the weather around here anymore? We now have 2 seasons instead of 4. I said when I moved back from Maine and then when I lived in Florida, it will be nice to have a change of seasons again. Holy cow. We went from just roasting to death to now freezing. Do you realize it was 30 below zero this morning when you woke up? But there was none of that. There was they were the only couple who had a perfect relationship with God. Because since sin entered the world, everything else became broken. Then you know the story. Satan comes to Eve and he lies to her and he says, didn't God say that you can't eat from any of the trees from the garden? God didn't say that. The devil is a liar. He's always been a liar. He will always be a liar. He is a liar. That's what he is. God hadn't said that. He said, you can only not eat from one. That's the minimum temptation that you have. Everything else is within limits. Whatever you want to do, just one tree is off limits to give you a choice because I want you to choose to love me. Now, one of the things you have to realize is that carnality always acts like children. Now, let me explain that to you. If you have children at all, or if you can remember back when you were a child, if your mom and dad told you not to touch something, what did you automatically do? You touched it. If we put up a sign out here that said, wet paint, do not touch, you know what would happen? People would come by and touch it. Why is that? Because they're dumb, that's why. Every temptation comes to that basic issue. I want to be God. Satan never tempts us to be like himself. Satan never tempts us to be like himself. Satan says, do this because you know better than God. Because God is old-fashioned. He's out of date. He's not up with the times. Because God is out of control. And because you're a god. Eve fell for that line. As a matter of fact, let's Let me read the story to you in Genesis chapter 3. We'll pick up the story about verse 6. So Eve ate some of the fruit. Then she also gave some to her husband Adam, who was with her, and he ate it. Immediately their eyes were opened, and then suddenly felt shame at their nakedness. This is where shame enters the world. There had never been any shame and never any guilt, never any fear prior to this. Now listen to this. So they sewed fig leaves together to cover themselves up. Then they heard the Lord walking in the garden in the cool of the day, and they hid from God. That's hilarious. They hid from God among the trees, but God called out to Adam, "Where are you?" Adam replied, "I heard you coming, and I was afraid because I was naked, so I hid." Then God asked, "Who told you you were naked? Have you eaten from the tree that I commanded you not to eat from?" Adam said, "You gave me this woman." You see the humor in that. "And she gave me the fruit, so I ate it." Then God said to Eve, why did you do this?" Eve replied, "The serpent deceived me, and I ate it." So God said to Eve, "You'll have greater trouble in pregnancy and great pain in childbirth. And though you'll desire your husband, he's going to lord it over you." Then God said to Adam, "Because you also disobeyed me and sinned with your wife, the ground you work is now cursed. And though you will eat what you planted, your fields will have weeds and thorns and thistles. And for the rest of your life, you'll have to sweat and work hard to get your food until you yourself are returned to the dirt that I created you to." Now that's the story. This is a fascinating story because it's filled with enormous amounts of spiritual truth in it. As a matter of fact, we base everything on this, don't we? From the very time that man fell, that he is an agent of sin and he needs forgiveness. But I just want to point out the relational truths. How our fears, first of all, ruin our relationships. Fears ruin relationships. The first fear we learn is this. It is the fear of exposure. The fear of exposure makes me distant. Why can't I get close to people? I'd like to be closer to my wife. I'd like to be closer to my husband. I'd like to have intimacy, that soul passionate intimacy of a partnership. Why can't I get close to the people in my life? My fear of exposure makes me distant. People say I can't get up close to anybody because when people get close to you, the closer people get, the more they see your blemishes, the more they see your mistakes, your faults, your failures. We keep people at a distance because of fear of exposure, that people will know what we know about ourselves. I get up here, look pretty good every Sunday. Pretty good, it's all relative. But you see, I live with a person that sees me every day. She sees my hair sticking up. She sees when I get up in the morning and I don't look so good. She sees a few other things, and she knows me inside out. She knows my thoughts before I think them, and we're just in love. But she also knows the relationships that I have, and she knows the relationship and where it goes, and she knows me better than anybody else. Now, am I going to walk in here in my PJs and my hair sticking up on end? You have got to be nuts. I'm not going to do it. Because, why? You don't want me to, first of all. But I don't want people to see the blemishes that sometimes that I hide. And you don't either. We keep people at a distance because of the fear of exposure, that people will know what we are about ourselves. You don't want them being shared by anyone else because they might reject you. There is also a reason why people stay away. I have said it for years. I've said it to my staff constantly. There is especially when you're ministering to individuals, there is always a reason why people stay away. Now think about that for a second. I don't care what it is, there's always a reason why people stay away. They might not stay away physically, they may be here, but you know emotionally, mentally, every other way, they've checked out. You say something to them and it just doesn't register. What have they done? They are staying away from you in their emotional self. They're staying away. Now you can rest assured there's always a reason why people stay away. People cannot be sick as much as what they've told me down through the 30 years of ministry. There's always a reason. Now in verses 9 and 10 of Genesis it says, God called Adam, "Why are you hiding?" And Adam said, "I was afraid because I was naked, and so I hid." Now, listen to me for a moment. Whenever God asks you a question, it's not because he wants to know the answer. He already knows it. He's asking those questions not for his benefit. He's asking the question for Adam's benefit because he wants Adam to own up. As long as you're in denial, there is no recovery. Right, Chuck? There is no recovery. There is no transformation while you are in denial. Fear always causes us to hide. Now, I just wonder if we were to be gut level honest. Now, this is a hypothetical question. This is not to be answered out loud. In my first church, there was a gal there that answered out loud on every question I asked, and I didn't want that to happen. I wonder what you're hiding from today. I wonder what you're hiding from. Can I share with you for a second? Well, I don't know why I ask your permission to say this. I want to share with you that statistics tell us, that 50% of all of the men that come into this congregation here today will have viewed pornography in the last week. Now, don't look at your neighbor. Think that he's some kind of perv. But we hide. Now, come on, guys. Come on, gals. I'm talking to you. Do you realize that the quickest growing internet pornography is not by men? The quickest growing internet pornography is by women who view pornography. So, if it's 50% for men, they say now that it's up to 37% for women. Hello. What are we trying to hide? I want you to notice the damage that fear does to a relationship. There are 3 stages, and we see all 3 of them here in this. First of all, there's shame. When you disobey God, shame enters your relationship with him. There's shame. They suddenly felt shame at their nakedness. Fear is often based on shame. The second thing is, phase 2 is cover up. What happens is, when we feel ashamed, we try to conceal who we really are, our true selves, and what we're at in the middle. The Bible says, so they sewed fig leaves together to cover up themselves. That's a hilarious thing. If you've ever seen a fig leaf, they're not very big. Some of us would need a lot of fig leaves to cover up. They would sew them together to cover up their nakedness. Today, we have much more sophisticated ways of covering up of who we really are. We don't have to use fig leaves anymore, thank the Lord. But we do it all the time. I wonder what ways we use to cover up our fears, our insecurities. What ways do we cover them up? There's a third phase. We move from shame and cover up. The third phase is distance from God. This is horrible. Then they hid from God among the trees, which is hilarious. We not only start fearing others, but we start fearing God out of shame. God doesn't expect you to be perfect, but he does expect you to be honest. The first fear, the fear of being exposed, and that causes me to be distant. The second fear we see in Adam is the fear of disapproval. My fear of disapproval makes me defensive. We move from simply hiding and running and covering up to now just being defensive, and we start attacking other people back. We're not just excusing ourselves, we're accusing somebody else. I start pointing fingers at everybody else and excusing to accusing. The more critical person is, the more you know they fear disapproval. So you see these commentators and preachers and other people always pointing out the wrongs of everybody else. They're afraid of being disapproved of themselves. Verse 12 says, God asked, did you eat what I told you not to eat? Now look at all this. And Adam said, you gave me this woman. No. He didn't blame it on the woman. He blamed it on God. He said, God, it's your fault. You gave me the woman. 38 years ago, I got married. I felt that it was God's will. It was God's will. That's what I pawned it off as. It was God's will. God gave me the woman. Adam said the same thing. He said, you gave me the woman, God, and therefore it's not my fault. It ain't even her fault. It's your fault. If you hadn't made this woman, you and me, God, we'd be like this. It's all my wife's fault. I'd be really close to you, God, if I weren't for that wife, that woman. She seduced me. She got me all messed up. My fear of exposure makes me distant, and my fear of disapproval makes me defensive in life. But there's a third fear I see in Adam and Eve. It's the fear of losing control. The older I get, it seems like the more control I want to have. But the older I get, the more control I realize I do not have. My fear of losing control makes me demanding. My fear of losing control makes me demanding. The result of Adam and Eve's sin is that they lost control. They lost control of everything. They lost control of their future. They got kicked out of paradise. Now they're feeling out of control because they were out of control. They weren't controlling anything at this point. Let me say it this way. The more out of control we feel, the more controlling we become. I start protecting myself. The more out of control you feel, the more controlling you become. Verse 16, where God says to Eve, you'll have yearnings for your husband. In other words, you're going to love your husband even though you're both messed up. But he will lord it over you. The Berkeley version says, he will dominate you. This is where the war of the sexes began, right there. All the misunderstandings between men and women and husbands and wives, boyfriend and girlfriends, where you're not cooperating, but you're competing with each other. Competing. I told you last week, my spiritual father used to tell me that in any marriage you need to have a flywheel and a balance wheel. In our marriage, I am the balance wheel. Kathy's always flying off the handle. You can tell. You can tell by her personality. You need to have a flywheel and a balance wheel. But I want to tell you, I've seen a few, and I've been in a few marriage counselings where I said, man, I would love to be a fly on the wall in their house. Because the sparks, baby, are going to fly. You don't need 4th of July at their place. I'll tell you that right now. It's just going to go. And sure enough, it goes. All the misunderstanding between men and women, husbands and wives, all of that. What is the antidote that transforms a relationship that relieves these three fears? The fear of exposure, the fear of disapproval, and the fear of losing control that causes me to be distant and defensive and demanding in relationships. There's only one antidote to this fear. It is love. I must learn to live in God's love. Notice first on what it says. The first half of the verse says, wherever God's love is, there is no fear. There is no fear. You see, when you love God with all of your heart, with all of your soul, with all of your mind, with everything that you have, it casts out the fear. In other words, I don't fear him in the sense that he's going to zap me at any time, or I need to get in out of the rain when it's storming and all of that. Because I love him with everything that I have. But you see, when I play games, when I act like I love him, like I'm faking him out, I can say on here on a Sunday, man, I love Jesus Christ with everything I've got. And then he'll say to me, no, you really don't. But you see, when I do love him with everything that I have, every ounce of energy, everything that I have, every mind, will, and emotion is just wrapped into him, and I love him with everything that I have, and I have a relationship with him, I want to tell you, it is paradise, brother and sisters. It is paradise. I love him, and I feel that he loves me. Why is it that people will stand and watch a burning fire building burn down and everybody's afraid to go in? But somebody runs in to get the baby. Who is it? It's the mother. Why? Because she loves that child more than anything else. Kathy and I were talking just on the way here. By the way, I made it here just in time because it said next exit Birmingham, Alabama this morning. Well, I'm not kidding you. I'm dead serious. I was going to go to Gulf Shores, Alabama, just make a quick dip and then come on in for church this morning. We were talking on the way here, and we were talking about our children. We love our kids. We love them with everything we have. We really do. But it's amazing to me when it comes to our children that we will not admit when they've done wrong. I learned very quickly when I came to Kentucky that everybody is related. I did. Let me see here if I can grab something. Joey, where's your bowstring on this thing? It's hanging behind this? Oh, okay. I'll try not to touch the hair. It's not here. So it's probably better. Oh, it's on the music stand. Oh, right here. Okay, good. This right here is the Kentucky family tree. Pretty much goes just straight up and down like that there. Yeah, there ain't much branch going out one way or another. That's pretty much the Kentucky family tree right there. You're seeing it, straight up and down. That's what it is. I learned very, very quickly, it was amazing to me that I learned very quickly that you do not talk about somebody at all, ever, unless it's with your wife, and that's in very, very secret, confined areas. Because you know what I found out here in Kentucky? All of a sudden I'll be saying something, you know what? They're a controlling person. They need to get a grip, man. They just need to get a grip. All of a sudden somebody will say to me, look at me, and they'll go, did you know they were my cousin? And I'll say, no, I didn't know that. But I know it now, and I'll not ever say a bad thing about them ever again. You see, when it comes to family, you don't walk on that stuff. But you know what? We need to get a grip, you guys. Sometimes, I'm not saying all the time, I know you're a perfect little angel. Doesn't do a thing wrong. Never will. As a matter of fact, I'll bet you dollars to donuts that Joey's little Lily never poops her pants. Never. She was perfect. She always has been, always will be. So learn to live in God's love. This is a result of fear. The second part of that verse, it is thought of punishment that makes a person fearful. What is the thought of punishment? It's thinking about the negative consequences. How many times have you been afraid to tell the truth because you know of the consequences that are going to happen? Man, I knew it with my dad. And I would lie. Man, I would lie. I would lie to save my hide. That's what I would do. I was right there in church one time when Todd Bryan and I decided that, and that was back in the days that you wore suits to church. And I'm talking about if you were even a teenager. And so Todd Bryan put on my green suit, or the sport coat, while I put on his black one, and it looked ridiculous, and we were laughing and cracking up and doing all that kind of stuff. And then all of a sudden, my dad came up to me and sat right next to me. We only lived about a mile from the church, but it was the longest mile drive I had ever taken. Then he said to me, Scott, as we drove into the driveway, he said, Scott, you go to your room. I'll be in a minute. And I thought, oh, no. So he said to me, do you know what you did this morning? I said, no. What did I do? You were acting up in church. That's what you were doing. Now I'm going to show you what happens to people that act up in church. And he showed me. I didn't like that. It's the fear of punishment, oftentimes, that causes us to lie. You guys, when we get caught, when we are caught, first of all, don't do the thing. But second of all, if you do the thing and you get caught, you might as well own it. Because God knows anyway. And just like my dad knew when I was there, he knew what I did. I knew what I did. I wasn't owning it. And that got me twice the whooping. So, What is the answer to that? First of all, how do I learn to live in God's love? Every day I surrender my heart. When you wake up, you sit on the side of your bed and you say, God, before I even start this day, I surrender the center of my emotions to your will. Wherever you have me go, whatever you have me do, whatever conversations I have, may it honor and glorify you, O God. I want you to control my mind and my emotions, my mind and my heart. Second thing, I not only surrender, every day I remember. Every day I remember God's love to me. You have to pause every day and remember that God loves you, because if you don't feel loved by God, you're certainly not going to offer love to anybody else. This is what removes my fears. Last thing, every day I offer that same love that Christ gave to me to somebody else. Listen to what it says. I'm giving you a new commandment to love each other. Love each other in the same way that I have loved you. Chuck said this morning, it's so true. You can't outgive God. And boy, Chuck, you're right with that. You can't outgive God. I've tried. It made me broke. But one thing you can't do is you can't outlove him either. Give her a shot, and this world will be a better place. You see, Christians are known not by the rules that they keep. Christians are not known by the political party that they are. Sorry. Sorry. It's not known by that. Christians are not known by the social media that they create on the internet, because they want to see everybody to see the best part of them and who they are. Christians are not known for any of that. You know what they're known for? They're known for the way that they love each other.
Set my heart on fire.